Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is celebrating her beautiful book. It's called Some Days. Our guest is Julie Stamm. Before we invite Julie into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by author Lauren Kirstein and her website, laurenkirstein.net. Are you looking for books about courage, strength, friendships, foster care, and dragons? Who doesn't love dragons? Well, look no further. Lauren Kirstein is the author of Rosie the Dragon and Charlie, a great series that was illustrated by Nate Ragg and published by Two Lions. She's also the author of Home for a While, illustrated by Natalia Moore and published by Imagination Press. If you want to laugh, cry, learn swimming, and bedtime tips, and find social emotional strategies for your kids, please be sure to check out laurenkirstein.net. Lauren's books blend her Jersey girl humor with her psychotherapist heart. That's laurenkirstein.net. 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 Joining us right now from the great state of Colorado, our guest today is here to celebrate a beautiful picture book. It's called Some Days. Please welcome to the show, Julie Stamm. Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm really happy you're on too. Now, most days when I'm asking a guest, how are they, it's kind of like a polite thing, and we expect them all to say, great, fine, it's awesome to be here. But there are a lot of days for you that aren't great. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's so. I have multiple sclerosis, MS, and so my days aren't always predictable. So, one day you'll wake up and your legs won't be working right, or you can't see out of your right eye, or hear out of your right ear, or each day is a different challenge. So you never really know how the day is going to work out. And then some days are pretty good days, and you're grateful for those.
Yeah.
But every day, with MS, it's very unpredictable, and you just don't know what the day is going to bring. So it's hard to plan. But the book is based off of the days that I've lived with my son. Whenever a parent picks it up, I always tell them, read it by yourself first, because it invokes a lot of emotion in adults. And then read it to your children, because they see it completely different than the adults see the struggle and the fight and the resilience in the mother, but the children just see the adventure and the fun in it.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk to you about the adventure, but before we get any further, now I have to admit, I'm probably like a lot of people out there. I actually know somebody. I've met her in person, but she's mostly a Facebook friend. She was a teacher for one of my online classes, but she has MS, and so I know the term MS, and I'm very familiar with the word multiple sclerosis, but I'm here at almost 100 years of age, and I don't really know what MS is. Can you give us a little, you told us that it's something different every day. What's going, is it a neurological, biological kind of?
Yeah, it's a neurological disorder that your body it's autoimmune, so your body attacks itself, and it leaves little lesions, so the multiple scars. Is really what multiple sclerosis means, on your brain and your spinal cord. So depending on where those scars are, it affects different places. So if I have a scar on this side of my brain, it will impact the left side of my body, or, certain scars on your spine will impact different parts, whether it be your limbs or just sensation. So the way I explain it to children is it's like an iPad. So your body is the iPad, and you have, no matter how much you had it plugged in overnight, it only starts at 50%. That's your body. It's never back to that 100% that you used to be. And then sometimes you click on an app and it just goes to a different app, or it just shuts down completely. So your body doesn't really follow the signals, the way it should. Mm-hmm. So it takes some adjusting, and it takes, I've had it for 14 years, almost 15 years. And it takes a while, but you learn mechanisms and treatments and things that help you live with it and live a relatively normal life.
Wow. Now, you mentioned the scars. When I think of a scar, I think of something, I'm looking, I have a scar from my dog that I got probably 14 years ago. It's always going to be there. But it sounds like the scars you're talking about, they move around a little bit?
No, you accumulate them. So when they're active, they are called enhanced lesions. So that means that they're actively impacting something in your body. And with each scar, there is a symptom usually associated with it. And those symptoms, there are different forms of MS. There's relapsing remitting. So it means that you have a period of a really hard time, and then that scar is no longer enhanced, and then you can feel relatively normal again. Mm-hmm. And then there are people with progressive MS, like myself, so you develop a symptom and it just never goes away. So it really depends on what type of MS you have. But I think now, so we're in such a better situation than we were when I was diagnosed. There were only 3 options, and now there are more than I can ever count. So it's just a different disease. So I always tell people, if you're diagnosed now, it's not what you read on the internet. It's not, don't go down that rabbit hole. Just breathe and do some research, because there is so many more options that can keep you stable now. They're more effective, and it's not the disease it once was. It's a small percentage that end up in a wheelchair, which is what a lot of people fear when they hear the diagnosis. And I think everyone, when they first hear it, they initially Google it, and then they see images of worst case scenarios. And my goal is to show them that even with progressive MS, and I've had it for a very long time, and I've been through the years when they didn't have good treatment options, I'm still standing, and no one can predict your future. They told me I wouldn't be walking in 10 years, and I'm still walking, still dancing. So I try to be a hope, and I'm not unique. There's more cases like me than the cases that are so deteriorated. And I think that's what people need to focus on, the fact that it isn't that there's just so much positive when it comes to it now.
Well, that obviously is a important thing, to have that kind of positive outlook. You want to be realistic. You want to listen to your doctors, follow the treatment. But if you get the diagnosis and you immediately go to that worst case scenario, oh, woe is me, this is terrible, I'm going to be whatever in 6 months, a year, 2 years, right, then you're probably going to be there.
Yeah. You have to be positive. I allow myself 1 day a year to cry my eyes out. I'm like, you can feel sad for yourself 1 day. That's it. And that's the day I sit down and I think about the stuff that really upsets me about it. And then I'm like, okay, got that out, and now move on. You can't live every day dwelling on what has been lost or what could possibly, we don't know we didn't know coronavirus was going to happen. And look, we're all here. We're dealing with it. So no one can predict your future. So what you can do is live in the moment and enjoy what you have when you have it. Yeah. And you can't predict it. So, stop trying,
And especially when you have a young son, you tell me your son is 5 years old. Yeah. So you absolutely have to be positive then. But you explained to me that when you started sharing the stories in the book, you were kind of looking at things as like, oh, I'm a terrible mom. My poor kid has to deal with all this terrible stuff, and oh, I feel so bad for him. But then you were surprised. How did he surprise you?
Shocked by him, actually. And it was really, this book wouldn't exist if we hadn't had the conversation about all the days that I feel terrible. Like most of those pages are the nights that I cried myself to sleep thinking I was a complete failure of a mom. And so I write my son notes. And so I just wanted to hear from him, like, how did he feel on that day when my legs didn't work and we had to scooch around instead of me being able to pick him up and, and he was like, you mean train day? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you see this world completely different. You know, I had to miss a birthday party with him when he was 3. And I had so much guilt because I was like, all these kids, it's going to be so much fun. There's going to be a ball pit, and just, I had so much guilt about him missing it. So I gave him a bath, and I got balls, and we made a ball pit in the bathtub. And, you know, he loves that. He still loves to do that. And he's fine. You know, these are moments that, yeah, he did miss that party, and I feel bad that he did, but he had a great day, you know, and all of the pages that are in there, you know, it's hard for me because I remember how hard those days were. But when I talk to him, like when he reads this book, he's proud of those days. He's like, oh, you mean that day? Oh yeah, the day that I found the potty first? Yeah, that was a good day.
Well, I love that. I love that your son just has this natural instinct to do what one of the things I taught my daughter, and I was sharing this with Julie before the show, when my daughter toured with me a lot as I traveled around the country. And when you're traveling around the country, going to these schools in small towns, and you're by yourself or you're with your teenage daughter, stuff happens sometimes. The car breaks down, you get lost, the people expected you next week and not today. And if you're able to look at those situations, when you're in the moment, if you're able to say to yourself, this is going to be a good story. This is going to make for a really good story. It really helps you deal with that moment. It's no longer a crisis. It's like, oh, I'm just in the middle of a movie right now. And that's what it sounds like. Your son is kind of like, yeah, well, you know, who knows what's going on, but this is another day, and we're going to make the best of it.
Yeah, and he's such an empathetic boy. I mean, I can't overstate how proud I am to be his mom, and just of the boy that he's become. You know, he's the kid at the table that will make sure that everyone has their food before he digs in. That's not even something I taught him. He's just that kid. He's always been very caring. And I used to, when he was younger, I'd be like, help mama up, even though I didn't need help, just to get him ready for one day if I did need help. And I talked to a physician. He said, no. So don't say that. Say, let me see strong, Jack. And like, focus on the positive. And I think just changing the way you word things to them changes the way they look at it. Like, instead of, he's not helping me, he's being a strong boy. He's, you know, just being a good, like, human being, instead of putting the guilt and the pressure. I don't want him ever, you know, I always say with MS, even though I'm the one that has it, everyone in this household lives with it. My limitations, unfortunately, fall on him some of the time. But he's okay. And he's so completely loved. And he, you know, when we talk about life, this is what matters. He's happy. He knows he's loved, and he's living a great life. So I think listening to our children is very important. And when we stop and do that, we start to learn a lot about ourselves too.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he had a good role model in terms of empathy. You know, you were telling us, you know, that when you were struggling on those days when you couldn't get up, when you had to scooch around, you were feeling terrible because your needs were impacting your son, and you weren't able to do things for your son. And I know that there are a lot of people who have difficulties that when they're feeling bad, they're only feeling sorry about themselves. And I'm not going to say that if I was in the same situation that I would feel any differently. But you are living this, and you're living this struggle, and you're not focusing on, oh, woe is me. It's like, oh, I'm worried about how this is impacting my family. And I think your son picked up on that and learned from that.
Well, thank you. I never even thought of it that way. So I appreciate that. He's just, you know, you're a father. So, you know, you sit up at night and you're like, did I give enough vegetables? Did we do too much screen time? Did we go out in the fresh air or not? You know, we just overthink. It's just the role of a parent. You know, their needs should come before ours. And it's hard. It's tough. Parenting is tough. But then when you talk to other parents, everyone has something, you know, whether it be high blood pressure or bipolar or depression, or everyone has something that they're battling. And, you know, so I know my book specifically is for MS or chronic illness. But I was surprised with the first edition when it came out. how many parents that didn't have a chronic illness were appreciative of it. So that was very exciting.
Well, I mean, I think it's, and we love to talk about this on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. You know, books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. We can, you know, a book can reflect a kid's life. And so it's so important for kids of all races and ethnicities and family situations to see themselves portrayed positively on the pages of books. But windows are also a wonderful opportunity for kids outside of those circumstances to look in. So if there's a kid who grows up in an all-white neighborhood and has no interactions with kids of color, if they can sit down and read books with characters of different races and ethnicities, they can start to see that these are people too. These kids, they look differently, but they love baseball just like I do, and they love to eat way too much sugar and run around crazy just like I do. And in the case of your book, I think that this is an incredible resource for families to look and say, hey, we're really blessed, but let's take a look, because we are going to know somebody in our lives that's going to be dealing with a chronic illness. It might not be MS, but there's going to be somebody in my classroom who has a parent, a grandparent, a sibling who has MS or Parkinson's or dementia or some kind of struggle. And this is a great way to start talking to our kids about these situations. I'm just at the beginning of this, just at the beginning of this interview, I said to you, I've known somebody for many years with MS, but I've never gotten around to ask them what it was.
Yeah, it's. I've never met someone that doesn't know someone, whether it be far, you know, and more people are getting diagnosed because there's better diagnostic measures now. But I think just knowing, like looking at other people and just assuming that they have something that they're dealing with is kind of a good way to do it. Don't assume everyone's had the best day, you know, just go in with a kind heart. You know, my son, he just started school last week for the first time. I'm a bigger mess about it than he is, but you know, apparently another kid was crying on the way in. So my son stopped crying to go comfort him. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I think it's really important to look around and survey who's around you and just, you know, I hope kids see the mom with a walking stick, and you'd be surprised when I'm walking with one, you know, people always ask like, what happened? A ski accident, or did you break your ankle? And I think we need to draw attention that it's very uncomfortable when someone comes, you know, you shouldn't just run up to someone and say, what happened to you? Because this isn't, you know, I don't mind I'm an open book. You can ask me anything about MS and my symptoms, but I think just being more, caring about how someone might feel about that. Cause I know a lot of friends that do use walking sticks that don't feel comfortable disclosing. So maybe just teaching our children that, you know, not everyone looks the same. People are in wheelchairs. People use devices to help them. And that's okay. And let them talk about it if they want to. But it might not be the first thing.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm sure one of the things that happens when people run up and go, hey, what happened? You know, how'd you break the wheel? A skiing trip? You know, a bike ride? Oh, MS? Oh, ooh. And suddenly, now I get uncomfortable. Like, oh. Yeah. It's, boy, this is such a, you know, we're living in an age where, you know, people with challenges and disabilities are in our communities, and it's wonderful that we can start having some more empathy. And you know, one of the things that I was speaking to an author not too long ago, and I was involved before I started performing and way before I started doing podcasts. I was working in a school for kids with severe developmental disabilities, and my job was to take these kids into the communities. These were kids who couldn't walk or talk or feed themselves, and you know, my job was to help them develop friendships with their fellow 10-year-olds or 15-year-olds. It turned out to be a lot easier than people thought, because I think kids have a lot of natural empathy, and but it's boy, it's I'm glad we're progressing as a community, and we're understanding that a lot of times we look at somebody with a challenge and we think, well, why can't they change? Well, they can't change. If you could wave a magic wand, you'd make your MS disappear, but you can't. So we can make accommodations to help you fit into the community better and help others.
Yeah, and I think the world is doing a better job of it. I think just having more representation of different people and, different abilities it's finally happening. I don't know. I feel personally within the last year, maybe year and a half, there's been a major shift, even in television, where there's representation. And I think, people are coming out and becoming advocates, like Selma Blair, Christina Applegate, all Montel Williams, just in terms of, MS, but, there are millions, and Michael J. Fox, and their work is helping someone that is newly diagnosed, seeing them as role models. So that's my hope. I do it on a smaller scale, but, if I help one person a week, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job.
Well, you're definitely helping. You've made a huge impact on one very important person's life, your son, and that's awesome. And I guess the question I have now is just thinking about this as, did you ever picture yourself as a children's author?
Never. I honestly didn't think that I was able to have children. So, he's always been my greatest blessing. Everyone has different, he's my world, my entire everything. So, everything evolved from him, so I'm interested in the stuff that he's interested in. And so the fact that I can create something that he's proud of and that I'm able to read at his school and, and create book 2 and book 3, these are important things that we do together. So just if I only had one copy and I went to him, I would be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now that there are other copies out there and you're out reading books and do you ever sit down and take a moment to think to yourself, wow, there are families all over the world that are reading my book?
It is wild. I received a message from someone in India and Australia, and I was like, wow, I'm getting around the world with this guy. It's pretty cool. It's really great. And, just having kids understand it a little bit more is pretty, and, I used to live in New York, and we lived in a complex of 1,023 units. And I was like the mom that set up all the events, and that was just what I was into. And it was amazing to me when the book first came out, that no one knew. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how had no one known? Like, how did people not realize this? Cause I think it's so obvious, but apparently it is, which is great. But it was good to talk to the kids and let them see that, hey, you don't even have to know, but some people have struggles, and you don't necessarily need to know, but you should be kind to anyone regardless of what they're up to that day.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you if you've ever thought about writing a book for adults about MS, but I think you already have.
No, so I wrote, Some Days We was the first book. But I self-published that one, and it got a really big following, and we had a good amount of sales, and we were very excited. And then we got picked up by a traditional publisher. And that's when it got really exciting because it became hardcover. And, although my son doesn't like that he's not blonde in it, in the first version, they look just like us. But other than that, it's like my dream now. And I was able to add more pages and stuff to this one, which was exciting. Wonderful,
wonderful. Well, my point was, I think even a picture book can have a huge impact on adults. And you were saying that you always recommend to adults that they read it themselves first before they read it to kids. And I think a lot of families that are struggling with MS or another, especially another degenerative, progressive disease or illness, it can be really kind of depressing. I know when my mom had Parkinson's and dementia, it was really hard to say, well, it's not going to get better. It's, we can only hope we can slow this down.
Right.
But I think that the positive attitude that you're showing here tonight and the positive attitude that's in Some Days is going to be an inspiration for a lot of those parents who are going to read the book to their kids.
Thank you. I really appreciate I definitely tell every parent read it first because every adult that's read it in my presence has cried. Mm-hmm. So, and most adults come back saying that, I have an adult reading of it at a wine bar coming up. So, it will, I think, like you had said, it's important to appreciate what we do have mm-hmm. and then see that people do struggle and they still do okay.
Yeah.
And so in terms of writing an actual adult book, I don't have it in me, but.
Well, I don't think you need to, because I think Some Days does the trick. Their picture books can be very, very powerful. They're not just for kids.
I know. I agree. 100%. And it's cool. Like the adults that didn't know that I had MS, they got me a little bit more after reading it, which is pretty great.
That's awesome. Julie, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Some Days. And also, I think they're going to want to know where they can find out more about you.
Oh, well, I am on Instagram. So it is I am Stamm. So IAMSTAMM. And, you could email me at info@somedayswe.com. And we are on Amazon and we'll be pretty much in every bookstore. So
awesome.
And hopefully libraries. So regardless of if you can afford a copy.
Yeah. And, a great thing to happen, even if you can't afford a copy, pick up the phone, call your local librarian and say, yo, can you stock Some Days by Julie Stamm in the library? I want to take it out, and then you can take it out. But it will put it on the librarian's radar and help Julie get that book into as many libraries as possible, because it's a great resource for families, I think.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We've
had a great time speaking to the author of Some Days, Julie Stamm. Hey, Julie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's time for another Reading with Your Kids Rewind. We're going to be looking back at some great moments from past episodes of the podcast. All right, tomorrow's episode will be focusing on guests who address the topic of media literacy. So important to talk to our kids about what they are consuming when they're watching TV, on social media, looking at all the different billboards around them, even when they're consuming great books. That's the next episode of the podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Julie Stamm. Please be sure to check out Some Days, her great book. I also want to thank our sponsor, Lauren Christine. Please be sure to check out laurenchristine.net and be sure to check out her books, Rosie the Dragon and Charlie, and Home for a While. I also want to thank my team, Alana Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.